When it comes to inheritance, things can get messy, and they can get messy really fast. Emotions are running high, and a lot of the time, people just fall back on family traditions or, well, pure guesswork. But in Islam, dividing up property isn't supposed to be a negotiation or some kind of cultural debate. It's actually a divinely ordained system, and it was designed specifically to replace all that human guesswork with divine fairness. So let's jump in and see how it all works.
So let's start with the big one, right? The question that can literally tear families apart. When a loved one passes away, how do you fairly divide everything they've left behind? Who actually has a right to what? It's a super personal and honestly often a painful process. And if you don't have clear rules, it can lead to some really serious, long-lasting conflict.
And that is the heart of the problem. When there isn't a clear, respected framework that everyone agrees on, people just start making up their own rules. And this reliance on personal opinions or, just flawed traditions, that's exactly what Islamic law was meant to prevent.
Now, get this. This warning isn't some new idea. It's actually over 1,000 years old. The companion of the Prophet, Uqba ibn Amir, was already pointing out the danger of guesswork way back then. The solution he offered is the same one we're talking about today: knowledge. You have to understand the system to protect families from all that confusion and injustice.
And this slide just lays it all out so clearly. On the left, you've got these common cultural myths. Things like only sons get to inherit, or that if a daughter got a dowry, she doesn't get a share of the inheritance. These are just human inventions, plain and simple. But on the right, you see the actual Islamic principles. A mandated, specific share for both men and women, and it has absolutely nothing to do with dowry. Why? Because inheritance is a right, it's not a gift.
Okay, so if we're throwing guesswork out the window, what are we replacing it with? Where does this system actually come from? Well, let's get to the foundation. This whole system is rooted in a direct commandment from God, and it was designed to bring justice and clarity for everybody involved.
It really all comes down to this one verse from the Quran. This is the foundation for the entire framework. And notice the key phrases here: a share for men and a share for women. It also says it doesn't matter if the estate is huge or if it's tiny. The share is obligatory. This isn't a gentle suggestion. It's a non-negotiable law.
So, and this is really the key takeaway, the shares are fixed. The system clearly defines who the heirs are, spouses, children, parents, and it assigns each one a specific, unchangeable fraction of the estate. The whole point of this is to remove human bias, emotion, favoritism, all of it, completely out of the equation.
All right, so it's one thing to talk about it from a religious perspective, right? But you might be wondering, how does this whole system actually stack up under a microscope, like from a purely legal, secular point of view? Well, you might actually be surprised by what legal scholars have found.
So for that, let's bring in an expert. This is Professor Subbarao, who studied all kinds of family law in India. And just to be clear, he wasn't looking at this from a religious standpoint. He was analyzing its structure and its practical effectiveness purely as a legal academic.
And his conclusion? Well, he was pretty much blown away. He called it a well-planned system and said it was uniquely effective at solving the incredibly complex problems that always seem to come with inheritance. He was basically praising its brilliant design.
And he didn't even stop there. He went on to praise its incredible precision. Not just that it was good, but that it was as precise as is humanly possible. I mean, that's a pretty powerful endorsement coming from a legal expert, and it really highlights just how meticulous and comprehensive this system is.
Okay, but let's be real. Every system has potential issues, right? So let's tackle the biggest, most common criticism you hear about this law, and let's see if the system itself actually has an answer for it.
And look, it's a fair question. It makes sense on the surface. If you have to divide a property among a lot of heirs, each person could end up with a tiny share that's just not useful anymore. I mean, you can't exactly chop a single house into 8 physical pieces.
So, is that it? Is this a huge, unsolvable flaw that's just baked into the system? Well, not exactly. Turns out, the system actually anticipated this exact problem.
The fix is built right in. It's a legal concept called shufa, or the right of preemption. And honestly, it's a super elegant solution. It basically just means that if one of the heirs wants to sell their small piece of the property, they have to offer it to the other co-heirs first. This gives the family the chance to buy the share, consolidate the property, and keep it whole, instead of having it get broken up and sold off to strangers piece by piece.
And just so we're clear, This isn't some legal patch that was added on centuries later. This idea comes directly from the Prophet Muhammad himself. His ruling shows that this right of preemption applies specifically to undivided shared property, which is the exact scenario we're talking about.
And you know who else thought this was a brilliant fix? Our legal expert, Professor Subarao. He points to this exact principle, preemption, as the key to the whole system's longevity. He saw it as the built-in, self-correcting mechanism that's allowed it to stay practical and effective for centuries.
All right, now we come to what you might call the ultimate stress test for any law. How does a law really prove its integrity? It's when it gets applied without any exceptions, even to the very person who brought it, and to the people closest to him.
The most powerful case study we have comes from the Prophet Muhammad's own inheritance. I mean, if there was ever a time to bend the rules or make an exception, you'd think this would be it, right? But the whole point is that the law stands above every single individual, no matter what their status is.
So here's what happened. After the Prophet passed away, his daughter Fatima, who he loved dearly, came to ask for her share of his property. The leader of the community at the time, Abu Bakr, then had to explain a very specific rule related to the role of a prophet, that their wealth isn't a personal estate for their families. Instead, it becomes a public charity after their death. And even though it must have been incredibly painful for everyone involved, the divine law was upheld. The principle was held as more important than even the most beloved family ties.
And just to be absolutely clear, this wasn't some new rule Abu Bakr was making up on the spot. The Prophet himself had laid this out clearly during his lifetime. He confirmed that his personal legacy wasn't going to be material wealth for his family, but a public trust for the entire community. He truly lived by the rules he taught.
And that's really the heart of it all. It shows that this is a system built for pure equity. It's designed to rise above our human emotions, our sense of status, and even the incredible love between a father and a daughter. The goal is always a higher, more impartial justice.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. When you have a legal framework that's so absolute, it applies without exception even to its own founder, what does that really tell you about its commitment to justice, its integrity, and its ultimate source of authority?